Thank you for the introduction, Kodo. I think Kodo was aware that I am actually reluctant to give a talk right now. In part that the practice period has been uneventful. You should be laughing, because honestly, you don't want an eventful practice period. I have deeply appreciated the calm, the quiet, the cooperation, the connection of all of us who have come together into this space, into this temenos, this sacred space, in the way that we have, which has been kind and sensitive and also bright, very bright. Now, at a sit a few days ago, I was looking at the rupa, the statue on our altar of Manjushri. And just to let you know, this is for history's sake, maybe 23 years ago, I was in Nepal and I asked my friend Tenzin, I said, we're building this temple and I would like to find a statue of Manjushri. And he took me to a friend of his where this statue was in his place. And I really loved it. Manjushri is often in the sort of Chinese form, a little bit staid and stout. And this was such a feminine expression of wisdom. And that touched me deeply, partly because I'm a woman, needless to say, in this incarnation. But also in the hands of Manjushri is the sword, which is this quality of mind that's characterized by a kind of preciseness. And in the other hand, Manjushri holds a blue lotus. And that blue lotus exemplifies the union of compassion and wisdom. And it reminds me of a book that came out in 1967 by Thich Nhat Hanh called Lotus Blooming in a Sea of Fire. And it was a radical declaration of peace made to our country, who was bombing his country and Cambodia and other places. Now, one of the things about the blue lotus that is really important for us to bring to mind is that it only blooms in a sea of fire. It only blooms in the field of suffering. And this points to something that is so powerful about this practice. It is not just the simple union of wisdom and compassion, but it is an example that we can sit with, where we come to realize that wisdom and compassion are not like two ends of the same stick. They're actually more like wave and water, completely inseparable. That actualizing compassion requires wisdom. And awakening to wisdom is based in the experience of compassion. Now, of course, this image is very poignant to many of us today as we contemplate the 32 wars raging on our planet, as we look at the wreck of Gaza, the anger and anguish of Israel, the blistering cold of Ukraine, what is happening in Yemen, Sudan, and in so many quarters. And we are here in this sacred space, in this temenos, in a place where, yeah, people have had some upsets. There's no doubt about it. I sit there in the Doksan room and listen to, I didn't like the beans kind of conversation. So it's like, but this is a place where we actually enter into, in this very beautiful and warm and holding space, a la Winnicott, we actually begin to explore not only our response to the charnel grounds that many of us are very connected to, and distally also in relationship to, the charnel ground of sitting at the bedside of a dying person, the charnel ground of sitting with people on death row, the charnel ground of war, the charnel ground of greed, the charnel ground of this climate catastrophe that we're in. We talk about global warming. This chill that is enveloping our country is really arising out of the warming of our planet. But also the charnel ground of our own minds. It's really radical what happens between our ears. And when you sit in a space where there is structure, but where there is a relative absence of threat, of sort of top-down kind of oppressive approaches, but the space is characterized by what Tai spoke to in his peace proposal in 1967, a space where we actually have the capacity to sit in the sea of fire, in our everyday circumstances, in the circumstances that are happening on our whole planet. And it is not to be not disturbed. I think this is one of the really important things for us to understand. I had a wonderful meeting with one of our guests today who used the word detached. Buddhism is not about detachment. It is actually about the opposite. It is not about indifference. It is not about a kind of flattened cipher-like experience of our interpretation of equanimity. It is actually our capacity to turn toward the truth of suffering, both internal and external, and to understand that they are deeply connected one with the other. It's very, very important to understand that, to look deeply, and to also come to the realization that what our practice does is allow us to turn the light within, not to obscure our difficulties, but to actually make them visible to us. Visible to us, because without that, this blue lotus won't bloom. That is what is so important for us to understand. This is a process, an experience where we are asked not to bypass, but to look deeply at our lives and the life of this world, seeing them as not separate, and coming into a relationship with our own suffering that allows us to be in a state of empathy, of connection, of expanding our subjectivity, to understand that the sea of fire within us, that we actually allow ourselves to access, is what will cause our own compassion and wisdom to flower. And it's kind of a tough assignment. For me, it's been quite a ride this month. usually at the end of the year, my half-brother and I talk at the anniversary of my father's death. And we extol my father. He was a really lovely human being, very kind, super smart, had his share of problems, but nonetheless, he was such a good person. I think the word integrity is something that Jack and I often referenced in our interactions with each other. But I had this whopping bronchitis, and I just didn't have it in me to interact over anything. And then 10 days later, he died. And it was one of those moments. His funeral is happening on Friday, so I'll be virtually going to his funeral. But it's one of those moments that reminded me of when my teacher died, Glassman Roshi. And I was in Japan, and I opened my computer earlier than, the regular rising hour in Japan, because I had just flown in from the States. And I learned Bernie had died. And I realized my beloved teacher, and I realized this life, our connection to it is so tentative. What do we want to do in our life to really awaken so that we can touch the world in a way that is characterized by nonviolence and by care? And I believe that's why we're here. I was so appreciative of Kozan's talk. Hi, Kozan. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, because to be perfectly frank, I've been in a moon-faced Buddha state of heart and mind, very much fed by our good friend Alan Sanaki's critical health situation. Thinking about my father's death and learning of my brother's death, and then thinking about the massive deaths in Gaza and in Israel and Ukraine. And sitting, with the truth of sorrow, not turning away from grief, but allowing myself the quietness, particularly as I experience the Zendo and sit in my parents' chair. That little teak chair in the back belonged to my mother and father. Sit in that chair and to really touch how important it is to be scoured out and rehumanized by loss. Just as when the Buddha died, his nuns stood next to his body and their tears fell upon his body. So equanimity in this case, we understand that we use the interpretation given by Thai, which I think is so radical a view of inclusivity. We do not turn to our addictions. We actually include that, but all into our experience. Not using our addictions to obliterate the power and poignancy of our human experience, and also very much in the spirit of Shantideva, to understand that actualizing the spirit of the bodhisattvas is what we are here doing, to greater or lesser degrees. So in Kozan's wonderful talk of sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, what you feel in the koan around Master Ma is not that he was pseudo-cheerful. Actually, he was dying. And he met the reality of his mortality with that kind of quality of inclusivity that we're talking about here this afternoon. And particularly poignant for those of us who are going into session, because the density of our experience will increase as we've been preparing over these weeks for a time of more intensive practice. But in the sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha koan, and such a wonderful talk goes on. Thank you for that. Whatever face is showing up is the face that is showing up, if you know what I'm meaning. Whatever is arising is your reality in that moment. And also the truth of impermanence prevails. It's not all puppy videos, if you will, that we'll turn to cheer ourselves up, so to speak, which I do, by the way. I will confess. I'm a complete victim of puppy videos. So I just, if I'm too moon-faced Buddha, I'll watch a puppy video and I'll sun-faced Buddha myself. But no puppy videos over session, please, right? We just stay with our sun-facedness or our moon-facedness and the feeling of settledness in this place as we sit in this sea of fire of our own transformation, right? The work that you and I and all of us in this space are engaged in. So ultimately, Buddha nature cannot bloom without being in the charnel ground, being in the sea of fire. I mean, it's a tough assignment that we have been given in this assignment to rehumanize ourselves and to actualize the experience of one body or of praticca-samuppada, of interconnectedness, getting past our ego loneliness to the experience of non-separateness from all beings and things. And yet, of course, in the experience of sesshin that we're heading into, a lot can come up for us. For example, I was thinking the other day about the 5 fears. I think somebody was talking to me, they're having to give a talk and they feel, that's one of the Buddhist 5 fears. So it's, loss of mind, loss of life, loss of livelihood, loss of reputation, and speaking before a public assembly. So, that too. And also, that comes up in our experience, needless to say. Our own mortality, particularly, as we're so aware of Sensei Sonaki's situation, which is breathing on his own, but not awake. Maybe moving to a skilled care facility, but for the grace of God go I, feeling. Leave me alone, don't save me, as my body is going through its release process. All the things that comes up. Or my brother who died in his sleep. What a merciful passing, perhaps, which reminds me years ago, I was teaching at Harvard on care of the dying. And I will tell you, I asked, how many people want to die in their sleep? And almost everybody raised their hand. That's an option too. It's wonderful. But what comes up for us, sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, in the experience of our practice is life. That's what presents itself to us. And there are hindrances that arise for us that I think are really important for us to be aware of as we sit. And I kind of love those hindrances because, needless to say, I'm only partially rehumanized, so to speak. The hindrances still come and dance inside of me. And so, you know, one of the most common hindrances is of sensory desire. You know, it's like sitting in this space and all you can think about is the chocolate in your room, right? It's that kind of grasping that comes actually from dissatisfaction. You know, like this feeling of there's not enough. And so we mobilize subtle or very direct grasping. Also, ill will arises. You know, I remember in some sessions in my early years, I actually felt vivid ill will toward the doan. Now, the doan is the bell ringer, right? Or the jikido. I would be like, why in the heck are they not ringing that bell, you know? But so often the ill will is actually turned toward our own situation. And it's very toxic for us and becomes toxic for others. And ill will is a really vivid hindrance for us, that we are not good enough. We lack integrity. We're greedy. We loathe ourselves. We haven't met what our parents wanted us to actualize. We're not able to actually show up on time, and etc. And then there's the hindrance that I know many of you, because we've been here for weeks in the schedule, and it's one of my most favorite, but often people have a very adverse relationship to it, is the hindrance of sloth and torpor. And one of the rich questions that I get asked in Dokusan is like, so, you know, I'm sitting, but I just actually want to sleep, you know. And I say usually, that's fine. Allow yourself to let go. Don't turn ill will toward your sloth and torpor. It is potentially an impermanent state, I hope. I'm looking at Ethan, who has shared his concerns about sloth and torpor. But it's to also understand this is a practice that is about waking up, not being dull, not hiding out, not falling into somnolence, but to have the quality of mind that I remember Kaz once said, the Rinzai school, the monks in the Rinzai school have warrior eyes, but the monks in the Soto school have grandmother eyes. Grandmother eyes. It's a quality of Robai Shin, of this kind of grandmother's heart, where we actually lift ourselves out of the grip of aggression as we practice awakening non-coercively, but considering what are we doing with this life? What are we doing with this life? And then there's the hindrance of restlessness and a kind of neurotic concern, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. And the hindrance of doubt, where our trust in the practice, in the teachings, in small doubt, is just not there. Instead of the great doubt, where you begin to open yourself to that wonderful line is that so? Is that so? Is this really true? Is this really true? So these hindrances show up in this koan that I'm going to share. And I actually, Kozan, I think you gave a talk on this koan. So this is the golden carp koan. And I have to tell you, I chose the koan for an odd reason. Maybe 30 or 40 years ago, I read a book by Rodolfo Anaya called Bless Me, Ultima. I think it probably was maybe like 40 years ago, or maybe more, when I was in the process of moving to the Southwest. And it was this very powerful encounter between culture fields, between the Catholicism that is very embedded in the field of our history here, and also the religion of the indigenous peoples on the Rio Grande Pueblo and up in the northwest of New Mexico and so forth. And the kind of encounter between these two worlds, and the faith that was broken in the young protagonist in this book, Bless Me, Ultima. And Ultima is a robai shin. I see, Monshin smiling. I think you've read the book. Ultima is the absolute characterization of what a robai shin, of what it is to have a grandmother's heart, what it is to be a bodhisattva, to stand up against hatred, as Ultima did in the novel, a prejudice against her as a woman and as a healer, and ultimately dying in the face of that prejudice. Well, I was thinking about this book as I was kind of considering what koan to sort of sit with in the practice period. And I decided I would look at the film. I hadn't seen the film. And the film is wonderful, by the way. It's on YouTube for free. But the curious thing about the film, and I have to just say, I'm just astounded, because the one thing that totally got my attention and moved me in a kind of way of just sort of like a deep opening was the golden carp. And it wasn't in the film at all. But the golden carp represented that freedom of complete liberation in the wild, so to speak. And so I chose the golden carp koan for what I'm sitting with in this practice field, partly because of remembering reading the book and being so inspired, but also realizing that so much mortality is in my experience right now. And the characters in the koan are two great Zen masters, Zhang Shen and Shui Feng. And there's a very interesting relationship these two have, and that in a certain way, I want to touch into that, because for years when I would explore this koan, and let me just say, by the way, we've done something pretty odd here at Upaya. Usually you're given a koan to practice with. We ask you to choose one. So let me just say, this is completely backwards, but no problem. So these two wonderful teachers who became abbots of their different places had an obvious relationship, an obvious friendship. And they, like so many, including Zhao Zhou, of the teachers at that time, and I think about, again, Kozan, when Kozan travels around and he'll go to that Zen center and that Buddha center. Now, that's what the old monks did in China. before they settled into their mountain place. And that's what both of these wonderful teachers did, Sansheng and Zhuifang. And they traveled around and they tested the mind clarity of this abbot and that abbot, and their mind was tested, and they sort of built sort of dharma strength by gathering the teachings from various quarters and so on. And it's case 49, and it goes like this. Sansheng asked Zhuifang, "What does the golden scaled fish that goes through the net, what does it eat?" All right? What does the golden scaled fish that goes through the net, what does it eat? Well, you remember the next line goes on, right? Maybe. Am I putting you on the spot? Okay. Well, Zhuifang was, he said, "I will tell you after you have come out of the net." Right? That was kind of cheeky, don't you think? What I wanted to say, I love the spirit. There's a kind of cheekiness, but also there's a sort of, I read it with an absence of aggression. It's like these two guys kind of playing with each other. So Sansheng asked Zhuifang, "What does the golden scaled fish that goes through the net, what does it eat?" And Zhuifang says, "I'll tell you after you have come out of the net." Then Sansheng said, well, the teacher of 1,500 monks. And that's all you've got to say. And Zhuifang said, "This old man's busy with abbots' matters." Just off he goes. This old man is busy with abbots' matters. I want to read the capping verse, and I want to kind of go back to the koan. The capping verse is, "The old mountain pond, crystal clear, through and through. The solitary carp swimming by flourishes its tail and stirs up the bottom." Let me read it again. The old mountain pond, crystal clear, through and through. The solitary carp swimming by flourishes its tail and stirs up the bottom. Okay. So what does that golden carp eat that swims through the net? What do they eat? Anybody have a sense of that, what that might be? Well, I have to tell you, when I was young, the lady who took care of me, Lilla Robinson, and I used to go to these, these sort of bodies of water, sort of like lime pits in southern Florida, and we'd fish for catfish. And she'd cook up those catfish, the sweetest meat. And a catfish is actually basically a carp. And one of the things that is so interesting about this image of the carp, like the salmon, is that the carp in the perspective or the lore of Asia is that being who has this kind of beautiful determination to leap up the falls, one fall after another, swimming against the stream, just like salmon do. And that upon reaching the source, if you will, at the mountain's top, in this final sort of big effort, but beautiful effort, the carp transforms into a dragon. And the dragon, of course, is that archetype of awakening. What is it to be a dragon in this world? You know, one who has really put forth the kind of effort and determination while letting go deeply, but leaping against the stream and building the character strength that it takes to actually live in this world rehumanized. And we work this really fascinating equation in our practice, characterized by, you know, commitment, determination, showing up, energy, virya. By the same token, knowing that we have to let go. And it's working that leap and then flushed down again. And then we leap again and we're flushed by the water back. And we leap again and we're flushed down, and then we leap again and we make it to the next day. So we use this image of strong back, soft front. The point is not in this practice to build ego, you know. It's actually about strengthening our character. It's about living our vows. It's about staying the course. It's about touching the truth of the obstacles, the ill will, the torpor, the sensory desire, the hindrances that come up in our lives, honestly and deeply, and not turning away, but like the blue lotus blooming in a sea of fire, understanding these challenges that we experience in the context of our practice are in fact the invitation for us to awaken. Lotus blooming in a sea of fire. What does the carp eat, the golden scaled carp eat, who swims through the net? What do you think they eat? They eat shit. That's what they eat. They're bottom feeders. They feed on detritus. They don't just say, let's take the garbage out. It's more like Wendy and her compost pile, right? Are you willing to turn that pile, to plunge that pitchfork deep into the compost and to turn it and to add whatever nutrients are needed, the nutrient of brokenheartedness, the nutrient of compassion, the nutrient of determination, as this breakdown is happening of the ego, which is so threatened by deconstructing experience that we have in practice. And it's exhausting for many. Because not only are the hours somewhat long, but let me tell you, this is a merciful schedule. I have lived in other Zen centers. 3 a.m. wake up, thank you, but no thank you. I've aged out of that. 11 p.m. last sit of the night, no thank you, not anymore. But anyway, building that determination as an inner experience, not about ego, but what will it take for us to meet the world that we have co-created in our time? It's gonna take a thing or two, I think. Now, this exchange, I just told you what the golden carp eats, right? I learned that fishing for catfish in Florida when I was a young person. But this exchange between our two masters is interesting. Zansheng saying, the teacher of 1,500 monastics, and you can't say a turning word, right? And Shuidu saying, or Shui Feng, the old man is busy with abbot's matters. And this is very critical. Oops, sorry. This is a very critical piece because Shui Feng is in the net and he's fine there. Do you get it? He's fine. He's got it covered. There's no problem. The old man's busy with abbot's matters. He's in the net. It's not a problem. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Thank you. How do we actually sit in the grip of the stuff of our life and not make a bloody narrative drama of it? Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Master Ma's dying. No problem. Shui Feng, no problem. I'm busy with abbot's matters. And he and Sansheng have this, Shang San, have this wonderful kind of exchange. I don't think there was a put down between the two. For me, it's more like a play between the two. Ah, yes, the old man is busy with abbot's matters. Now, just in being respectful about time, I'm going to just say a few things about the verse and then we're done. So this old mountain pond, this is that quality of mind and presence that's characterized by simplicity, by depth and the feeling of ancientness. Ancientness. You know, this kind of deep dropping down into this mirror-like wisdom. In the humility, it's not, you know, the whole ocean. There's a kind of intimacy and humility that is at the very heart of our practice. Crystal clear through and through. Totally clear through and through. In this intimacy and clarity and ancientness. The solitary carp swimming by flourishes their tail and stirs up the bottom. And stirs up the bottom. And this is saying, do not fall into trance in this practice. Flourish your tail. Stir up the bottom. Let your store consciousness be open. Let the stuff that has not surfaced finally surface through the courage that you have to sit in your sea of fire. So when I was thinking about this talk, I want to finish with some words from the late Lou Richmond from San Francisco Zen Center. So simple, but this is this kind of synoptic characterization of what it is to be awake. And Lou puts it this way, says, everything is connected. Nothing lasts, and you are not alone. Everything is connected. Nothing lasts. And you are not alone. So I look forward to our upcoming session and to see what the flourish of your tales will stir up from the bottom. And in the meantime, keep leaping up those falls so that your dragon nature can be revealed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our dear Abbot. Though you're busy with Abbot's affairs, to offer a turning word. I almost wanted to shout out when you said, what does the carp eat? Fish food. I'm glad I didn't say anything. And we're a little late, so we're going to go ahead and kind of move on to our dinner that's waiting for us. Thank you to all our guests. Please come next week for Dharma Talk with Sensei Wendy Johnson in the middle of session, so we'll all be even quieter. And I'll be holding the begging bowl if you'd like to give and practice generosity. There's also QR codes outside if you prefer that, or you may just offer a bow. And we just thank you so much for your presence.